Let's talk about the future of the Democrats when it comes to Kamala. We were just doing a little hypothetical earlier that what if the vice president was someone who was like great and impressive and smart and people loved, and that would be a very different dynamic for the Democrats. But if there's anyone that people dislike more than Joe Biden, it's Kamala Harris. So what do the Democrats do with her?
They're in a tough spot with her because according to the USA Today poll, her approval rating was 28%, which is somewhere in between Delta and Omicron. And that isn't going to change anytime soon, but this is who she is. And this is part of the reason why so many people in the Washington, D.C. and New York bubble treat California as if we are a suburb of Guam. And they pay no attention to what goes on here. But everything that you're seeing, all of her deficiencies that you're seeing play out on the national stage right now, played out in California first. She wouldn't do the interviews. She wouldn't go on the shows. And when she would, she was ill prepared. Or she'd say, my staff will get back to you with the answer. I have a good friend who covered her campaign for U.S. Senate. She never had answers to any of the questions. It was always, my staff will get back to you. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. When she engaged herself in the border, it would be these grandiose meetings that she would have where she would meet with all of these attorneys and say that children seeking asylum on the border needed legal representation. And she would write press releases and generate headlines, but that's all it was. It was fluff. There was nothing behind it. The one policy thing that she did in California was hyper political. When she was attorney general, she would skew the title and summary of all the ballot initiatives so that she would trick voters into voting the way she wanted them to vote and voting against the ones that she wanted to fail. But that was her portfolio. That was it. And if you were paying attention in California, you understood that this was an ill-prepared woman who was not up to the office. It's one of the reasons that Willie Brown, her mentor, went public and said that she shouldn't accept the vice presidency because it would be a disaster. No one paid attention to him either. This isn't a surprise to anyone who paid attention to her in California. And apparently it is a surprise to the Biden people because they didn't know that that's who she was.
Wow. What is it about her? Because I remember reading one of the articles recently about how terrible it is to work for her, and that's she doesn't prepare, and then she yells at her staffers for being unprepared in the moment, right? What is that?
Yeah, there's a guy by the name of Gil Duran, who is the editor of a paper up in San Francisco. I think it's a San Francisco Examiner. And before he became a journalist, he worked in Democratic Party politics, surprise, surprise. And one of his bosses was Kamala Harris back when she was the Attorney General of California. And he writes extensively about what a horrible boss she was and about how all of the problems that you're seeing in the vice presidency existed in that office. The staff hated their jobs. They knew that she didn't have their back. They knew that she would throw them under the bus the minute she looked bad publicly. And that's part of the reason why no one in her office has loyalty to her. The negative stories about Kamala Harris aren't coming from the conservative media. Who's doing negative stories about her? It's CNN. It's the Washington Post. It's liberal newspapers and liberal networks. Why? Because the stories are all coming from within her office or from within the Biden White House. The Biden people don't trust her. Jill Biden doesn't trust her. The people who work for her don't trust her. And you can't operate in that world where no one who works for you is looking out for you. Right now, she is swimming in shark-infested waters, and at some point, the shark is going to eat you.
So if one is a Democratic operative, you can't kick Biden to the curb because she's the number two. So how do you kick the dementia patient out and the inept vice president? What do you do for these next 3 years and then in 2024?
Well, you can't because it's mutually assured destruction. So they can't publicly turn on one another. It's all has to be passive aggressive, not overtly aggressive. And the ace in the hole that she has to protect herself against Biden removing her from office or Biden trying to put her on the Supreme Court to get her out of the way or something along those lines, or Hillary Clinton jumping in the race and declaring herself to be a candidate. She can go public and say, listen, I deal with Joe on a daily basis. I see what he's like on the inside. This guy has lost his marbles. It's time for him to go. That's the power that she has. And that's the stick of dynamite that she can light on fire if and when she thinks they're trying to put a horse's head in her bed. So they have to be very careful of how they treat her, because she can do that if she chooses to do that. And people will pay attention to her. She is the vice president. She does see him on a daily basis. And if she says he's out of it and incapable of performing the duties, there's going to be a certain segment of the population that's going to pay very close attention to that.
Wow. Okay, who's the third person in line then, if not either of these two, as the future of the Democratic Party?
Well, you have Hillary Clinton waiting in the wings. So,
Amazing. Is that for real? Like, do you really think so?
Well, I mean, we'll know she's running if we find Ghislaine Maxwell hanging on her cell. But you look at this, the next crop of people below her, and they're all imploding themselves. I mean, Andrew Cuomo was supposed to be the one. He was the one that had all the glowing profiles written about him. That's clearly not going to happen. You look at the also-rans in the last Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders is 912 years old. It's not going to be him. Eric Swalwell is diddling Chinese spies. You know, it was nice knowing you. Amy Klobuchar had Minneapolis burned to the ground, and she's toxic in that world. I don't know who the next generation of Democratic candidates, I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're going to come from. They're in a real bind right now.
Yeah, it's got to be Newsom, though, right?
Well, you can't have two candidates from the same state constitutionally. You can't have one as the president, one as the vice president. They have to come from different states.
Is that right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And then realistically, he has the same donor base as her. They come from the same political machine in San Francisco.
Yeah.
His political career got started because of Willie Brown. Willie Brown appointed him to be a member of the Board of Supervisors up there. Willie Brown greased the skids for Kamala Harris to be elected district attorney there. So they're going to go to the same donors. They're going to go to the same benefactors. They're going to go to the same people for endorsements. You can't have two credible operations come from the same world. So it's going to be one or the other. And as long as she's around, he is aced out.
Hey, Slater Crusaders, check out our special about the state of the Democratic Party. If you're a Democrat, you are not happy with the situation right now. We're going to talk about Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. We'll talk about the Democratic Party's bench. They got nothing. But when you have Kamala and Gavin Newsom, who is the Democratic Party machine going to support? We talk about that and the social credit system that's coming our way, all on our latest special. Become a supporter and download our First TV app and watch it on demand.